After my wife Loretta died, I didn't tell my son Darius or his wife Monique that she had left me a farmstead, 3 cars, and a bank account in my name only. Thankfully, I kept quiet, because a week later I had a great surprise that changed my life forever. If I had been the fool I used to be and told them about the inheritance, today I'd be living like a beggar on the streets. But because Loretta, in her last days, squeezed my hand tight and whispered, "Marcus, don't tell anyone what I'm going to leave you. Not even our son. I can tell you this story, one many older men need to hear." It all began 3 months after the funeral. I was in the kitchen of my home, the house Loretta and I built with so much love during 40 years of marriage. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air as I set the plates on the table to welcome Darius and Monique. My hands trembled with emotion because I hadn't seen them for 2 weeks. I'd spent the whole morning preparing the lentil stew Loretta used to make when Darius was little. I wanted him to feel the warmth of home. I wanted him to remember the happy Sundays when we were a united family. The table was perfect. Clean tablecloths, the best dishes, the crystal glasses we used only on special occasions. Every detail thought out with a father's love, because after losing Loretta, Darius was all I had left in this world. He was my only son, my only family, my only reason to go on after so much pain. I had polished every last corner of the house. The floors shone, the windows let in the golden afternoon light, and I had even bought fresh flowers for the centerpiece. All because I wanted them to feel welcome, to know that this house would always be their home. I had also spent almost all my pension money on that special meal, but I didn't care. Every dollar was worth it if it meant having my family close. Loretta always said family was the most important thing. For 40 years of marriage, she was the one who kept our small family together. She was the one who called Darius when he didn't come to visit, who remembered birthdays, who prepared Christmas dinners. I worked so much at the mill that sometimes I came home when they were already asleep, but Loretta was always there, the heart of our home. I worked 35 years in that textile factory, getting up at 5 in the morning, coming home with stained hands and an aching back. All for them. Also, Darius could study, so he could have a better life than mine. Loretta managed every cent I earned, stretching the money, so nothing was ever missing at home. Now that she was gone, I felt lost. I didn't know how to be a father without her as go-between. I didn't know how to reach my son without Loretta translating my clumsy feelings. That's why I put so much effort into this meal. I wanted to show him I could take care of him, that I could be the father he needed now, that it was just the two of us. The first months after the funeral had been the hardest of my life. I woke up every morning expecting to hear Loretta's voice calling me for breakfast, but found only silence. The house felt enormous and empty. Every corner held her memories. The kitchen where she cooked my favorite meals, the garden where she grew her roses, the armchair where she sat knitting while watching her shows. There were days when I didn't have the strength to get out of bed, but then I thought of Darius and found the motivation to go on. He had lost his mother too. He was suffering too. We had to support each other in these difficult times. While I waited for their arrival, I sat in the living room and studied the photographs hanging on the walls. There we were, the 3 of us. Loretta radiant in her wedding dress. Darius as a boy running through the yard. Christmases, birthdays, the happy moments that now felt like another life. In one particularly beautiful photo, Darius was 5, sitting on my shoulders while Loretta took our picture in the park. He smiled with that pure child's laughter, and I held him with pride. When had everything changed? When had he grown so distant? When had I stopped being his hero? I remembered when he was small and ran to me shouting, "Daddy's home." Every time I returned from work, he hugged my legs so hard he almost knocked me over. Now, at 35, he barely greeted me when we met. Time had built a distance I didn't know how to bridge. The doorbell pulled me out of my memories. My heart sped up with joy. They were finally here. I stood quickly, smoothed my shirt, and walked to the door with a smile. When I opened it, there were Darius and Monique, but something in their faces made a strange cold settle in my stomach. Darius wore an elegant suit I didn't recognize, and Monique a costly dress with jewelry that glittered in the sunlight. They looked prosperous, successful, but their expressions were cold as ice. "Hi, Dad," Darius said in a flat tone, without hugging me. Monique didn't even look me in the eye. They simply walked past me as if I were invisible. It was the first time they'd visited me since the funeral, and that was how they greeted me. "Children, what a joy to see you," I said, trying to sound upbeat, though my voice cracked slightly. "I prepared the meal you love most, Darius. That lentil stew your mother made especially for you. I remember you always said it was your favorite when you were a boy." "Yeah, Dad, we saw." Monique cut in impatiently, looking around the house as if she were evaluating something. "Can we sit? We need to talk to you about something important." Something in her tone made me tremble inside, but I tried to keep smiling. "Of course, but let's have lunch first. Everything is hot and made with so much care. I even bought that sweet bread you like, Darius, from your mother's old bakery." Darius sighed heavily, as if my invitation were a nuisance. "Fine, Dad, but make it quick. We don't have much time. We have an important meeting this afternoon." I went to the kitchen with my heart racing. Maybe they were just tired. Maybe it was my imagination. I served the stew in the nicest dishes, sliced the bread carefully, and brought everything to the table with trembling hands. The steam rose deliciously, filling the dining room with that homely aroma Loretta loved. "Smells good, Dad," Darius said, but his voice sounded mechanical, without real feeling. He sat without waiting for me to bring everything. Monique settled beside him, eyes glued to her phone. "Monique, dear, how's work?" I asked, trying to start a friendly conversation while I poured coffee. "Last time we talked, you said you'd been promoted." She lifted her gaze from the phone for barely a second. "Fine," she answered coldly and went back to her screen. She didn't even taste the food I'd prepared with so much love. Darius ate in silence, without commenting on the flavor, without remembering the times he'd asked his mother to make exactly this dish. I tried to fill the uncomfortable silence with questions about his job, his plans, how he was handling Loretta's passing. "You know, son, your mother always said this stew was your favorite. I remember when you were 10 and—" "Dad, I'm not 10 anymore," he cut in sharply. "And we don't have time for nostalgia. We need to talk about serious things." His words struck me like a slap. I felt the bite of food catch in my throat. Since when were his mother's memories mere nostalgia? Since when had talking about Loretta become a nuisance? "All right, son," I murmured, setting my fork on the plate. "What did you want to talk about?" Monique finally put away her phone and straightened in her chair. She and Darius exchanged a look I didn't like. It was as if they had rehearsed this moment. "Dad, we've been thinking," Darius began, in a tone that reminded me of when he was a boy and had broken something and had to confess. "This house is too big for you alone. It's a lot of responsibility, a lot of maintenance." And, Monique added, "You're not that young anymore. Living alone can be dangerous. What if you fall? What if you feel sick and there's no one to help you?" I felt the world tilt around me. "But I'm fine. I can take care of myself. This is my house, our house. All your mother's memories are here, Darius." "Precisely," Darius said, avoiding my eyes. "Living surrounded by memories isn't healthy. You need to move on, make new friends, have activities. We know a perfect place." Monique continued with a fake smile. "It's a very nice senior residence. They have activities, nurses 24/7, prepared meals. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." I stayed silent, processing what I just heard. My own son, the only family I had left, wanted to take me out of my home. He wanted to lock me in a home as if I were a burden. "A home?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You want to put me in a home?" "It's not a home, Dad," Darius said impatiently. "It's a luxury residence, very expensive, by the way, but we can help with the costs." "Help me with the costs," I repeated, feeling anger rise in my chest. "With what money? You know I only have my pension." Monique leaned forward with that street seller smile. "Well, Marcus, that's what we were thinking. This house is worth a lot of money. If you sell it, you'll have enough to pay the residents for several years." "Sell my house?" I felt my voice rise without meaning to. "Sell the house I built with Loretta. Sell the memories of 40 years of marriage." "Dad, don't be dramatic," Darius said, chewing his food as if we were talking about the weather. They're just bricks and cement. The memories are in your heart, not in the walls. Just bricks and cement. My son had reduced my whole life to bricks and cement. The house where he was born, where he took his first steps, where Loretta and I nursed him when he was sick, where we celebrated his birthdays, where I cried when he moved out. Besides, Monique added, we can't be taking care of you all the time. We have our jobs, our plans. It's not fair for you to depend on us. Depend on them. But I had never asked them for anything. I only wanted them to visit me once in a while, to share a meal with me, to let me be part of their lives. Children, I said, trying to stay calm. I haven't asked you to care for me. I just want to stay in my house, in my home. I can manage on my own. Darius dropped his fork hard upon the plate. Manage on your own? Dad, look at you. You're thin, unkempt. This house is full of dust and old stuff. You can't keep living like this. His words cut through me like knives. I looked around and saw my home through their eyes. An old house, with worn furniture, with yellowed photographs. They didn't see the love in every corner. They didn't feel Loretta's presence in every object. Unkempt, I repeated, voice shaking with indignation. Darius, I get up every morning at 6, I bathe, I shave, I keep this house clean. How can you say I'm unkempt? I don't just mean looks, Dad. Darius sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. I mean your life in general. You have no friends, you don't go out, you don't exercise. You just stay here mourning, Mom. Mourning. I felt anger blaze like a bonfire in my chest. Is grieving the woman I loved for 40 years mourning to you? Missing your mother is a bad thing. Monique jumped in with that condescending voice that always irritated me. Marcus, we understand you miss Loretta, but it's been 3 months. You have to get over it and move forward. Life goes on. 3 months for them. 3 months were enough to forget 40 years of love. For them, my pain had an expiration date, like yogurt in the fridge. Loretta isn't something to get over, I said firmly. She was my wife, my partner, the mother of my son. She was my whole life. That's exactly the problem, Darius replied, dropping his napkin on the table with a gesture of annoyance. You made Mom your whole life. Now that she's gone, you don't know what to do with yourself. It's not healthy, Dad. I stared at him in disbelief. Not healthy. Loving my wife deeply wasn't healthy. Building a life with her was a mistake. Son, I said, trying to control my voice. Your mother and I had something beautiful. We were a team. We cared for each other. We loved each other. We built a family. Is that wrong? It's not wrong, Dad, but it's over. Monique answered coldly. Loretta died. You're still alive. You need to adapt to your new reality. New reality. As if my life were a TV show you could change when you got bored. My new reality, I repeated slowly, includes staying in my house with my memories, living as I choose. I don't need anyone telling me how to grieve. Darius leaned forward with that look he used to give me when he wanted to convince me of something as a kid. Dad, be reasonable. We can't be at peace knowing you live alone. What if you get sick? What if you have an accident? And what if I get sick in that home? I asked quietly, what if I have an accident there? At least here I'd be in my own house, surrounded by what I love. There you'd have professional medical attention, Monique insisted. Here you just have memories and loneliness. Memories and loneliness. That's how they saw my life. They didn't see the love I still felt for Loretta, the peace I found in our garden, the comfort of sleeping in the bed where we had been happy for decades. Besides, Darius continued, we need to know that you're well taken care of. We can't keep coming here all the time to check on you. All the time, I said bitterly. It's been 2 weeks since your last visit. Before the funeral, you went months without seeing us. Loretta always made excuses for you, said you were busy with work, with life, but I knew the truth. You just didn't care enough. Nobody's asking you to come all the time, I said, my patience wearing thin. It'd be enough if you came once in a while, like today. Exactly like today, Monique said sarcastically. We came after 2 weeks and found a house that smells like it's been closed up, a man living in the past, and a situation that worries us. Smells closed up, I repeated, stunned. I cleaned this whole house. I cooked for hours. I bought fresh flowers. How can it smell closed up? This house doesn't smell of love, Dad, Darius said coldly. It smells of grief and isolation. This house is clean, orderly, I protested, my voice trembling. I cooked for you, prepared everything with love. Dad, Darius said with that condescending tone that made me feel like a scolded child. Love can't replace professional care. In the residence, you'd have nurses, doctors, organized activities. And what would happen to this house if I leave? I asked, feeling my world crumble. What about all our things? The furniture Loretta chose, her plants, her books? Darius and Monique exchanged another look full of complicity that excluded me completely. Well, Monique said slowly, obviously you'd have to get rid of most of it. In the residence, you can only have the basics. Get rid of Loretta's things, I said, my voice breaking. Her photographs, her memories, everything we built together? Dad, they're just objects, Darius said impatiently. You can't live clinging to things. Mom wouldn't want you to turn into some kind of hoarder of old junk. Old junk, I repeated softly, my heart tightening. My son was talking about the treasures of my life, as if they were trash to be thrown out. Your mother loved every piece in this house, I said firmly. Every piece of furniture has a story. Every photograph holds a special moment. They're not old things, they're our history. Fine, Dad, Darius sighed. But the history is over. You need to think about the future now. The future. To them, my future meant being locked away among strangers, without my memories, without my home. But I saw my future right here, in the house I built with Loretta, tending her garden, keeping our memories alive. And what if I don't want to go to that residence? I asked directly. They exchanged another of those looks that made my blood run cold. Monique cleared her throat. Well, Marcus, we hope you'd be reasonable, but if you refuse, we'll have to consider other options. What other options? I felt a chill in my stomach. There are legal resources, Darius said, avoiding my eyes. We could demonstrate that you're not in a condition to take care of yourself, that you need supervision. Legal resources, I repeated, my voice shaking. My own son was threatening to take away my freedom. Are you threatening me, Darius? It's not a threat, Dad, he said calmly. It's reality. If you can't make sensible decisions about your well-being, someone else will have to make them for you. The world tilted beneath my feet. The boy I had raised with so much love, the one I'd given everything to, was now treating me like a senile fool. I make my own decisions, I said, summoning all the dignity I had left. I'm a grown man, fully in control of my mind. Oh, really? Monique sneered. And is it sensible to stay alone in this big house, with no one to care for you, living like a hermit? It's my decision, I replied firmly. This is my house, my life, my grief. Darius stood up suddenly, pushing his chair back with force. Fine, Dad. I see you're not going to be reasonable today. But this isn't over. We'll give you some time to think about it. There's nothing to think about, I said, rising too. I'm not going to any home. I'm not selling my house. I'm not getting rid of Loretta's things. Monique stood up as well, grabbing her purse in an irritated motion. Marcus, you're being selfish, thinking only about yourself. Don't you care about your son's peace of mind? Selfish, I repeated incredulously. I'm selfish for wanting to stay in my own house. And what about you? Don't you care about my peace? You're not happy here, Darius said flatly. You're depressed, isolated, living in the past. That's not happiness. And how do you know what happiness is for me? I shouted. When was the last time you asked me how I really feel? Darius walked toward the door without answering. Monique followed, but before leaving, she turned to me. Marcus, you have 1 week to think about it. After that, we'll have to take measures. 1 week? I asked, but they were already gone. Darius stopped at the threshold without turning back. Dad, this will happen, whether you like it or not. You can do it the easy way or the hard way. and they left me standing in my dining room, with the table set for three. The meal I had prepared with love barely touched, my whole world collapsing around me. I stood there for a long time, staring at the abandoned plates, the cooling food, the crystal glasses gleaming uselessly in the light. The silence hit me like a wave. It wasn't the same silence I had learned to live with after Loretta's death. This one was heavy with betrayal, abandonment, a loneliness that gnawed at my soul. I walked slowly to the window and saw Darius's car driving away. They didn't look back, not once. Not a final glance at the house where their son had grown up, where we had been a happy family. To them, I was already part of the past, a problem to solve, an obstacle to remove. I sat in the armchair where Loretta used to knit and tried to process what had just happened. My own son, the blood of my blood, wanted to lock me away. He wanted to sell my house, erase every trace of the life Loretta and I had built together. Monique's words echoed in my mind. You're only thinking of yourself. You don't care about your son's peace of mind. Peace of mind. What peace would Darius have knowing his father was trapped among strangers, dying slowly of sadness? I stood up and began clearing the table. My hands trembled as I carried the plates to the kitchen. The lentil stew I had made with such love had turned into a cold, tasteless mass. I threw everything in the trash. Eating after that was impossible. As I washed the dishes, the tears began to fall uncontrollably. I cried for Loretta, who had left me alone in this cruel world. I cried for Darius, the son I had somehow lost without realizing when. And I cried for myself, for the 70-year-old man who no longer had a family, who had no one left. When had Darius changed? I tried to remember. Maybe it was when he married Monique, that cold, calculating woman who never showed genuine warmth toward Loretta or me. Or maybe it started earlier, when he got that big job downtown, making more money than Loretta and I had seen in our whole lives. I remembered our last Christmas together. Loretta had cooked the traditional dinner, decorated the whole house, bought gifts for Darius and Monique with money we had saved for months. But they arrived late, left early, and barely touched the food. Monique spent the night glued to her phone, and Darius seemed bored, as if being with us were a tiresome duty. That night, Loretta cried after they left. "Marcus," she told me, "I feel like we're losing our son." I held her and told her it was normal for children to drift away when they built their own families. But deep down, I knew she was right. Darius wasn't the boy who once ran to hug me after work. He had become a stranger who tolerated our presence out of obligation. I finished washing the dishes and went to the bedroom Loretta and I had shared for so many years. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the photograph that rested on the nightstand. It was our wedding picture. Loretta was radiant in her white dress, and I, in my borrowed suit and nervous smile, was looking at her as if she were the most beautiful woman in the world, and she was. "Loretta," I whispered to the photo. "What do I do now? How could our son become like this? Where did I go wrong?" But Loretta couldn't answer. Only silence filled the room, heavy and cold. I felt the crushing weight of loneliness pressing against my chest. I stood and walked to the closet. In the back, behind Loretta's clothes I still couldn't bring myself to donate, was a metal box where we used to keep our important documents. I pulled it out carefully and set it on the bed. Inside were our marriage certificate, the house deed, my factory records, and at the bottom, an old yellowed envelope that Loretta had given me shortly before she died. "Open it when you need me," she had said with a weak smile and trembling hands. With shaking fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside were several legal documents I didn't understand at first, but what caught my attention was a handwritten letter, the ink slightly faded, the pen strokes uneven from her illness. I began to read. "My dear Marcus, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer with you, and because something difficult is happening in your life. I always knew this day would come, and I wanted to protect you the best way I could." My heart raced as I continued reading. Loretta had inherited a farm from her unmarried aunt years ago, but she had never told me. She had also secretly invested part of my salary over decades, building a bank account I didn't know existed, and the 3 cars she mentioned in the letter were classic vehicles her father had restored, kept in a garage I had thought abandoned. "Everything is in your name, my love. It's all yours." But please, don't tell Darius anything until you're sure you can trust him. I've seen how he's changed, how he looks at us now that we have less to offer. Use this to live with dignity, so no one can ever force you into something you don't want." My hands trembled as I read the bank account numbers. The amounts written there made my eyes widen. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of having. Loretta, my sweet Loretta, had been protecting our future in silence for years. At the bottom of the letter was a final line that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. "If our son ever fails you, remember that I never will. This is my last gift of love to you." I fell onto the bed, clutching the letter to my chest. Loretta had known. She had sensed that Darius might betray me, might abandon me when I needed him most, and she had prepared this salvation. For the first time in months, I smiled. I wasn't as defenseless as I thought. I wasn't the poor, vulnerable old man Darius and Monique believed they could manipulate and control. I had resources. I had choices. I had power. But most importantly, I had proof that Loretta had loved me so deeply she'd planned to protect me even after death. I carefully put all the documents back into the box and returned it to its place. Darius and Monique had given me 1 week to think things over. They didn't know they'd given me exactly the time I needed to change the rules of the game. That night, I slept better than I had in months. For the first time since Loretta's funeral, I didn't feel completely alone. She was still watching over me, still loving me, still protecting me. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sensation. For the first time in 3 months, I wanted to live. The sun streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating Loretta's photograph on the nightstand. For once, opening my eyes didn't feel like a burden. I had a mission, a purpose, something to fight for. I showered, shaved carefully, and put on my best shirt. I ate breakfast calmly while planning my day. The first thing I had to do was go to the bank to verify the account Loretta had opened in secret. Then I needed to contact a lawyer whose name appeared on the documents. The trip to the bank brought back memories of when Loretta and I used to go there together to make our small deposits. We'd count every dollar carefully, always worried about making ends meet. I never imagined that while I was fretting over bills, she was building a secret future for me. At the bank, the clerk, a young woman with bright eyes, reviewed the papers with surprise. "Mr. Marcus," she said, "this account has a very considerable balance. Are you sure you never knew it existed?" "My wife handled everything quietly," I said, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and pride. She was a wise woman. The numbers on the screen left me breathless. Loretta had managed to save and invest an amount that represented more than I had earned in my last 10 years of work. Every dollar she'd set aside in silence was a testament of love, proof that she had been thinking about our future while I worried about the present. "Would you like to make any transactions today?" the clerk asked. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to transfer all of it to a new account in another bank under my name only." I wasn't taking any chances. If Darius and Monique decided to dig into my finances, they wouldn't find a cent in the bank where we'd kept our family account for decades. After the bank, I went to see the lawyer listed in the papers, Mr. Lewis, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, who had been a friend of Loretta's family for years. "Marcus," he said warmly when I entered his office. "Loretta told me you'd come by one day. She spoke of you often, always with great affection." "Mr. Lewis," I said, placing the documents on his desk, "I need to understand all this. Loretta left me things I didn't even know existed." He smiled gently. "She was an extraordinary woman. She came to see me 2 years ago when she was diagnosed. She said she wanted to protect you, that she had a feeling about the future." He explained that the farm was located 3 hours outside the city, in a small town, surrounded by hills. It was a 50-hectare property with a colonial-style house, stables, and fertile land currently leased to local farmers. The monthly rental income was enough for a comfortable living. "The 3 automobiles," Mr. Lewis continued, "are stored in a climate-controlled garage. They're classic cars restored by Loretta's father. Their market value is quite high among collectors. And it's all really in my name." I asked, still half in disbelief. "Everything, Marcus. Loretta made sure it would be impossible for anyone else to claim these assets." Even if your son tried an illegal action, he'd have no basis. I left the lawyer's office feeling as if I were walking on air. Loretta hadn't just left me financial security. She had given me options. I could stay in my current house and live off the farm's income, or I could move there and start a new life away from Darius and his threats. On my way home, I decided to cook something special for dinner. I had regained my appetite for the first time in months. As I stirred the pot on the stove, I thought about how Loretta had planned everything in secret. How many nights she must have stayed awake, calculating, saving, investing for our future. How many times she must have wanted to tell me, but decided that keeping it secret was the best way to protect me. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Darius. "Dad," he said, his tone tense. "Have you thought about what we talked about yesterday?" "Yes, son," I said with a calmness that even surprised me. "I've thought a lot." "Perfect," he replied quickly. "Then I suppose you understand this is what's best for everyone." "Oh yes," I said, smiling as I stirred the stew. "I understand perfectly. Many things I didn't before." There was a pause on the line. "Good. Monique and I will stop by tomorrow to go over the details. We found a residence you'll like." "Darius," I said softly, "tomorrow won't be a good day for me. I have things to take care of." "What things could you possibly have to take care of?" he asked with that condescending tone that always got under my skin. "Important things," I answered evenly. "Adult responsibilities." There was another silence. "Dad, don't make this complicated. We've already made the decision." "Who made the decision?" I asked, my voice suddenly firm. Because as far as I remember, in a free country, decisions about a person's life are made by that person. "Dad, don't start with drama again," he said sharply. "It's not drama, Darius. It's reality. My reality. My life. My decision." Before he could answer, I hung up. It was the first time in years I'd hung up on my son, and it felt liberating. That night, as I ate alone in my dining room, I looked at the photographs of Loretta hanging on the walls and whispered, "Thank you, my love. Thank you for knowing our son better than I did." The next morning, I woke before sunrise. For a few moments, I lay still, listening to the quiet hum of the house. It was the same silence that had once crushed me, but this time, it felt different. Not emptiness, but anticipation. I got dressed and made myself a strong cup of coffee. As I drank, I looked at Loretta's photograph on the table and whispered, "Today, my love, I start taking control." I had decided I would visit the farm. The idea had kept me awake most of the night. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to feel the place Loretta had secretly prepared for me. Maybe it could become my new home, far from the manipulation of my son and his wife. Before leaving, I packed a small suitcase, some clothes, the documents from Mr. Lewis, and Loretta's letter. I locked the house carefully, took one last look at the garden, and drove off in my old pickup truck. The road stretched ahead, long and bright beneath the morning sun. The drive was peaceful. As the city disappeared in the rearview mirror, the air grew cleaner, the trees taller, and the horizon wider. I felt like I was shedding years of weight with every mile. The farther I drove, the lighter I felt. After nearly 3 hours, I reached a narrow dirt road that curved between rolling hills. A sign by the roadside read Hawthorne Creek Farm. My heart raced. This was it. The gate was old but well kept, painted white, and surrounded by lavender bushes. I opened it slowly, the hinges creaking softly, and drove inside. What I saw left me speechless. The farmhouse stood at the end of a long, tree-lined path, a beautiful colonial home with wide porches and tall windows. Its white walls gleamed in the sunlight, and the garden was filled with blooming flowers. Birds fluttered through the branches of the old oak trees. For a moment, I could almost feel Loretta's presence there. She had loved nature, peace, and quiet mornings like this one. It was exactly the kind of place she would have chosen. I parked near the porch and stepped out. The air smelled of pine and earth, and something sweet I couldn't quite name. I walked up the steps, my heart pounding, and pushed open the front door. It wasn't locked. Inside, everything was neat and cozy. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, landing on wooden floors that gleamed as if freshly polished. There were rustic furniture pieces, oak tables, comfortable armchairs, soft rugs. The kitchen had copper pans hanging above a long counter, and a bouquet of dried flowers in a vase. It didn't feel abandoned. Someone had been caring for this place. As I wandered through the rooms, I noticed little details that made my throat tighten. A crocheted throw blanket, like the ones Loretta used to make. Family photos of her aunt's generation. A shelf full of gardening books. In one of the bedrooms, I found a note on the dresser. It was in Loretta's handwriting. "Marcus, if you are reading this, it means you've finally come to see what I built for you. I wanted you to have a refuge, a place to breathe, to live freely when the city no longer feels like home. There's someone here who will help you take care of everything. Trust her." At the bottom was a name, Clara. I frowned. Who was Clara? Just then, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned sharply. A woman stood in the doorway, maybe in her late 50s, with graying hair tied in a braid and kind, watchful eyes. She wore jeans, a plaid shirt, and work gloves. "Mr. Marcus," she said, smiling gently. "You must be Loretta's husband." I nodded, still a little startled. "Yes, and you must be Clara?" She took off her gloves and shook my hand warmly. "I've been looking after the property for years. Mrs. Loretta hired me before she passed. She said you'd come one day." "She told you that?" I asked, stunned. "Yes," Clara said softly. "She made me promise to keep the place in perfect shape, ready for you. She said it was her surprise gift to you." I swallowed hard. Loretta had thought of everything, even someone to take care of the farm for me. "Would you like some tea?" Clara offered. "You've had a long drive." We sat on the porch, watching the sunlight spill over the fields. The farm stretched as far as I could see. Golden fields, green hills, a barn in the distance. I felt peace seep into my bones. "Mrs. Loretta used to come here sometimes," Clara said as she poured the tea. "She'd walk through the fields, take notes, plan what to restore. She said this place made her feel alive again." I closed my eyes, imagining her here, the wind in her hair, her laughter echoing through the open space. My chest tightened with both love and sorrow. "She never told me," I murmured. "Not a word." "She didn't want to worry you," Clara said gently. "She wanted it to be a surprise, something that would save you if life ever turned cruel." Life had turned cruel, exactly the way Loretta feared, and she'd saved me again, even from beyond the grave. Clara gave me a small set of keys. "These are for the house and the barn. Everything's in your name now. I've been keeping the books and collecting rent from the tenant farmers. The income goes straight to your account." "Thank you, Clara," I said sincerely. "You've done more than I could ever ask." She smiled. "I'm just keeping my promise to your wife." We spent the afternoon walking through the land. The soil was rich, and the crops, corn, alfalfa, and some fruit trees, looked healthy. The workers greeted me respectfully, already aware of who I was. Apparently, Loretta had told them stories about me, a hard-working man who deserved peace after a lifetime of labor. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Clara prepared dinner, simple, hearty food that reminded me of home. After eating, we sat on the porch again, listening to the crickets. "You can stay here whenever you like," she said. "There's a guest room ready, and I live in the cottage out back. You don't have to decide anything tonight." But I had already decided. "I think I'll stay for a few days," I said, looking up at the stars. "I need some time to think, away from everything." Clara nodded knowingly. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Marcus. This place was meant for that." That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. The countryside was silent except for the distant call of an owl and the whisper of wind through the trees. I dreamt of Loretta walking through the fields in a white dress, smiling at me, her hand brushing the tall grass. When I woke up at dawn, I felt renewed. I walked outside barefoot, feeling the dew under my feet. The farm glowed under the morning light. I realized something I hadn't in years. I was happy, truly happy. After breakfast, I called Mr. Lewis. "Mr. Lewis," I said, "I've seen the property. It's more beautiful than I could have imagined." "I'm glad to hear that, Marcus," he said. "Your wife loved that place dearly. She always said it would heal you." I believe she was right, I said softly. Then I hesitated. But I need to ask, what would happen if I decided to move here permanently? Well, he said, everything would be simple. It's already legally yours. You could sell your old house, or keep it. No one, not even your son, has any claim to it. I felt a rush of relief. That's good to know. We hung up, and I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the hills. That's when I knew what I had to do. If Darius wanted to sell my city home and throw me into a residence, let him try. By the time he came back, he'd find nothing but an empty house and a father who had disappeared, living free on the land his mother had left him. It was time to teach him a lesson, not out of revenge, but out of love. A lesson about greed, about respect, about what really mattered. Loretta had built this refuge for me. Now I would use it to rebuild my life, and to remind my son what family truly means. I spent the next few days settling into the farm as if I'd always belonged there. Each morning began with the smell of fresh coffee and the golden sunrise spilling across the fields. Clara showed me how to feed the hens, check the fences, and walk the property lines. There was something deeply peaceful about the rhythm of it all. The way time seemed to slow. The way silence here didn't feel empty, but alive. Everywhere I looked, I saw Loretta's touch. In the small garden behind the house, she'd planted roses, just like the ones she used to grow back home. In the barn, a wooden sign hung over the door with our initials carved into it, M and L. She must have done it during one of her visits, years before. The sight of it made my eyes burn. Clara noticed. "She loved you very much, Mr. Marcus," she said gently as she wiped her hands on her apron. "She spoke about you all the time. She said this place would give you peace." "It already has," I told her, more than she could have imagined. Each evening, I sat on the porch watching the sunset, feeling something inside me heal little by little. The anger, the grief, the sense of betrayal, they were still there, but they didn't control me anymore. I had found something stronger, clarity. By the fourth day, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Darius and Monique wanted control. They wanted the house, the money, and the security they thought I didn't have. So I would give them what they expected, only not in the way they planned. I drove into the small town nearby, a place called Millbrook, with cobbled streets and old-fashioned shops. Everyone I met was kind, polite, curious about the new gentleman up at Hawthorne Creek. I smiled, realizing Loretta must have spoken about me here, too. My first stop was the post office. I needed to send a few certified letters, one to Mr. Lewis, my lawyer, and one to Darius. In Darius's letter, I wrote calmly, "Son, I've decided to sell the house, as you suggested. You were right, it's too big for me. I'll be moving somewhere quieter, where I can rest. Please don't worry about me. I've already arranged everything through my lawyer. Your father, Marcus." It was the truth, though not in the way he would interpret it. I was selling the house, and I was moving somewhere quieter, but not to the residence he wanted. The second letter, to Mr. Lewis, contained precise instructions. Put the city house up for sale, transfer the proceeds into my new account, and ensure that all official correspondence was redirected to the farm. Once the letters were sent, I walked through the little farmer's market and bought a fresh loaf of bread, honey, and homemade jam. It had been years since I'd felt so content with such simple things. When I returned to the farm, Clara was tending to the roses. "You've been busy," she said, smiling. "I'm setting things right." I told her, "For the first time in my life, I feel like I know exactly what to do." That evening, after dinner, I called Darius. He answered after the second ring, his voice full of impatience. "Dad, finally. We've been waiting for you to call. Did you think about the residence?" "I did," I said calmly. "You were right, son. Living alone in that big house doesn't make sense anymore." There was a short silence. Then his voice changed completely, excited, relieved. "I knew you'd understand, Dad. You're making the right choice. Monique will be so happy to hear this. We can help with the move, get the paperwork done fast." "I've already taken care of it," I said evenly. "The house will be sold soon." "What? You sold it without telling us?" "Yes. I wanted to spare you the stress of it. You both have busy lives. But Dad, I've already arranged everything with the lawyer. There's no need for you to worry. He was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating. And where are you going to live? Somewhere peaceful, I said. A place your mother left me. What do you mean, left you? I'll explain another time, I replied calmly. Right now, I just want you to know I'm fine. You don't have to worry anymore. Dad, are you okay? This doesn't sound like you. I'm better than I've been in years, I said softly. Goodbye, son. And I hung up before he could say anything else. When I set the phone down, I felt a sense of calm so deep it was almost frightening. I knew Darius well enough to predict what would happen next. He would call the lawyer, try to find out where I was, maybe even drive to the house to confront me. But by the time he did, it would be too late. 2 days later, I received confirmation from Mr. Lewis. The house was officially listed, and buyers were already interested. The value had appreciated significantly over the years. When it sold, I would have more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, and perhaps to set up something in Loretta's memory. That night, Clara found me sitting by the barn, staring at the stars. You look like a man with a secret, she said. I smiled. Maybe I am. She laughed. I don't need to know it, as long as it brings you peace. It does, I said, for the first time in a long while. The next morning, I was mending a fence when Clara came running toward me, waving her phone. Mr. Marcus, there's a man at the main gate asking for you. Says his name's Darius. My stomach tightened. He had found me faster than I expected. I wiped the sweat from my brow and told her, It's all right, Clara. Let him in. A few minutes later, Darius's car came up the path, shining and expensive, dust swirling behind it. He stepped out wearing a suit, out of place among the barns and fields. Monique was beside him, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Dad, Darius said, trying to smile. So this is where you've been hiding? I'm not hiding, son, I said quietly. I'm living. Monique looked around, unimpressed. So this is the quiet place you mentioned? A farm in the middle of nowhere? It's beautiful, I said, ignoring her tone. Your mother left it to me. Darius frowned. Mom left you a farm? She never told me anything about that. She didn't tell anyone, I replied. She wanted it that way. And the money? He asked sharply. You mentioned something about selling the house. Where's that money going? I looked him straight in the eye. Into my future. The one your mother made sure I'd have. Dad, listen, he began, trying to soften his tone. We're just worried about you. You're making decisions without consulting us. You can't isolate yourself here. I'm not isolated, I said. I'm surrounded by peace, by the land your mother loved, and by people who respect me. Monique crossed her arms. People who respect you? You mean her? She glanced toward Clara, who stood nearby watching silently. You barely know this woman. How can you trust her more than your own son? Clara stepped forward calmly. Mrs. Loretta trusted me, she said quietly. That's enough. Monique rolled her eyes, but Darius placed a hand on her arm to stop her. Dad, we can talk about this rationally. You can't just throw your life away living here alone. I smiled faintly. I'm not throwing my life away, Darius. I'm finally living it the way I choose. He looked frustrated, his voice rising. What about me? Don't I have a say in what happens to my family's legacy? Legacy, I repeated, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This isn't your legacy, Darius. It's mine and your mother's. You didn't build it, and you have no right to claim it. He froze. Monique's expression hardened. You're making a big mistake, she said. We only wanted to help you. No, I said, stepping closer so they could see the strength in my eyes. You wanted to control me, but Loretta saw this coming long before you did. She protected me, and thanks to her, there's nothing you can do to take this from me. Darius clenched his fists. Dad, you don't understand. You can't just cut us out like this. I'm not cutting you out, I said softly. I'm giving you a chance to find what truly matters. Because what you're chasing, money, possessions, it'll destroy you. He looked away, jaw tight. Monique grabbed his arm. Let's go, Darius. This is pointless. As they turned to leave, I called after them. You're always welcome here, son, but not as someone who wants to take, only as someone who remembers what it means to love. Darius stopped for a moment, shoulders tense, but said nothing. Then they drove away, the car disappearing down the dusty road. When they were gone, Clara approached quietly. Are you all right, Mr. Marcus? I watched the horizon where the car had vanished. Yes, I said slowly. For the first time in a long while, I am. I spent the next few days at the farm, and every morning I woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of fresh bread. Clara always seemed to know exactly what I needed: a warm breakfast, a kind word, or just quiet company. The days passed peacefully, and with each one, I felt a little more like myself. I began to help around the property. At first, I only wanted to observe, but soon I found myself repairing the old fence behind the barn, pruning the fruit trees, and walking through the fields with the workers. They treated me with respect, not as an old man, but as the rightful owner. That small gesture filled me with pride I hadn't felt in years. Every evening, Clara and I would sit on the porch, sharing tea as the sun dipped behind the hills. Sometimes we talked about Loretta. She spoke of you often, Clara said one night, her voice soft. She said you were the kind of man who gave everything to his family and never asked for anything in return. I swallowed hard. Maybe that was my mistake. I gave everything, and they forgot the meaning of it. Clara looked at me with understanding. Children don't always know what they have until it's gone. Maybe your son will learn that someday. I don't know, I said, staring into the distance. He's not the same boy I raised. He's colder now, harder, and I don't know if it's the world that made him that way or if I failed him somehow. You didn't fail him, she said firmly. You loved him. Sometimes love isn't enough to stop people from losing their way. Her words stayed with me. On the fourth day, I drove back into town to check on the house. As I approached, I noticed Darius's car parked outside. My pulse quickened. When I stepped through the front door, I heard voices in the living room. Darius and Monique were there, going through my things. What are you doing here? I demanded. Darius turned, startled but trying to look calm. Dad, you weren't answering the phone. We got worried. Worried, I said, my voice rising. Worried enough to search through my drawers? Through your mother's things? Monique crossed her arms. We were just checking on you. We thought something might have happened. Something did happen, I said coldly. You decided you can treat my house like it's already yours. Darius sighed impatiently. Dad, you're being paranoid. We were just... Don't lie to me. I snapped. I know what you're looking for. You think I have money hidden somewhere, don't you? The silence that followed confirmed everything. Darius looked away. Monique's eyes narrowed. Finally, she said, we know Mom left you something. It's not hard to guess. She was always secretive about her finances. You don't have to hide it from us, Marcus. Marcus, not Dad. The name hit me like a slap. You have no right to any of it, I said sharply. Whatever your mother left, she left for me. Her wish was that I live in peace, not that I hand over her legacy to people who see me as a burden. Legacy, Darius repeated, scoffing. Don't you understand, Dad? You're old. You can't manage things anymore. We're just trying to help you before you do something stupid, like get scammed or waste everything Mom worked for. I felt my blood boil. The only stupid thing I've ever done, I said slowly, was raise a son who thinks money matters more than love. Darius's face hardened. I'm being practical. You can't live in this house forever. It's falling apart. Then let it fall apart, I said, stepping closer. At least it's mine. He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised my hand. Enough. I know exactly what you want, the house, the money, whatever you think I have. But you'll get none of it. I'm not signing anything. I'm not moving anywhere. And you will not touch your mother's memory again. For a moment, he just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes burning. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the door. Monique followed, but before leaving, she turned back and hissed, You're making a big mistake, Marcus. You'll regret it. The door slammed shut. I stood there in the silence they left behind, trembling with fury and sorrow. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and tried to calm down. On the counter, the bouquet of flowers I'd placed days ago had begun to wilt, petals falling one by one. I felt like those flowers. That night, I returned to the farm. Clara was waiting on the porch when I arrived. She didn't ask what happened. She simply looked at my face and knew. They came for what wasn't theirs, I said quietly, sitting down beside her. Clara nodded slowly. And you didn't give it? No, I said, but I think it's only the beginning. They'll be back, and next time, they'll be ready. Then so should you, she said firmly. And I was. The next morning, I called Mr. Lewis again and explained everything. He listened patiently before saying, Marcus, we can make sure you're completely protected. If you want, I can transfer the farm and the accounts into a trust in your name only. That way, even if your son tries to challenge you legally, he won't get anywhere. Do it, I said without hesitation. And I want to make one more thing clear in the documents. If anything happens to me, everything goes to charity, not a cent to Darius or Monique. Are you sure? He asked gently. That's a strong decision. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Loretta built this to protect me. I'll make sure her legacy stays pure. Over the following days, I signed papers, notarized forms, and secured everything Loretta had left me. For the first time, I felt unafraid. A week later, Darius called again. His voice was cold, mechanical. Dad, we went by the house again. You weren't there. I've moved, I said simply. Moved? To where? To a place your mother left for me. There was silence on the other end. What place? He asked finally. You don't need to know, I replied. Dad, you're being ridiculous. You can't just disappear like this. I can, I said, and I have. He was shouting now. You can't just cut me off. I didn't cut you off, I said quietly. You did that yourself the moment you stopped being my son and started seeing me as a wallet. Before he could say another word, I hung up. That evening, I sat outside watching the sun dip below the hills. The sky was streaked with orange and gold, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees. Clara joined me with 2 cups of tea. You did the right thing, she said. I know, I said, but it still hurts. She nodded. It always hurts to see the truth, but sometimes it's the only way to heal. As we sat there in silence, I realized Loretta had given me more than security. She'd given me freedom. Freedom from fear, from guilt, from the illusion that blood alone makes family. The next morning, I began writing a letter. Not to Darius, but to Loretta. I told her about the farm, about Clara, about the peace I'd finally found. I told her I forgave our son, even if he didn't deserve it, because I couldn't let bitterness take root where love once lived. And as I sealed the letter and placed it in her old jewelry box, I whispered, You were right, Loretta. You saved me. Again. Several months passed, and life at the farm settled into a gentle, steady rhythm. The seasons changed. The cornfields ripened, the trees grew heavy with fruit, and the air filled with the scent of earth and life. I had learned every corner of the land by then. The sound the wind made through the willows, the place where the creek curved and glistened in the morning light, the exact moment when the sun dipped behind the western hill. I found peace in simplicity. I woke early, tended the garden, walked the fields with Clara, and spoke to Loretta every night before bed. I didn't need much else. I thought perhaps I'd live out the rest of my days quietly, and that Darius would never come looking again. But one afternoon, as I was stacking firewood near the barn, Clara came running, her expression grave. Mr. Marcus, she said softly, you'd better come. There's someone here to see you. I wiped my hands on my shirt and followed her to the front of the house. There, standing beside his car with the engine still running, was Darius. He looked different, thinner, older somehow. The arrogance that had always surrounded him seemed dimmed, like a flame losing its strength. Dad, he said quietly. I didn't answer at first. I just looked at him. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his suit, once perfectly pressed, was wrinkled and dusty. Can I come in? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Come on. Clara disappeared into the kitchen, leaving us alone in the living room. Darius looked around slowly, taking in the wooden furniture, the photos of Loretta, the scent of lemon oil and wood smoke. "So this is the place Mom left you," he said after a while. "Yes," I replied. "She wanted me to have peace." He nodded, his eyes drifting toward a framed photograph of Loretta that sat on the mantel. "She looks so happy there," he murmured. "She was," I said, "especially here." He sat down heavily on the couch and rubbed his face with both hands. "Dad, I owe you an apology." I stood still, not trusting myself to speak. "I was stupid," he continued. "I let Monique talk me into things. She said we had to think about the future, that it was irresponsible to let you live alone. But the truth is, we were greedy. She was, and I went along with it." I sat down across from him, silent. "When you left," he said, "and I couldn't find you, it hit me. I realized what I'd done. You were gone, and I didn't even know where. The thought that something could have happened to you, and I'd never see you again, kept me up at night." I studied him carefully. His voice shook a little. His hands fidgeted like a boy's. For the first time in years, I saw a trace of the child I once knew, the boy who used to run to the door shouting, "Daddy's home." "Where's Monique?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "Gone. We separated last month. She wanted the money, not me. When she realized you cut us off, she left. Said she wouldn't waste her life with a man whose father outsmarted them both." I almost smiled, but the sadness in his eyes stopped me. "I deserve it," he said. "All of it. I let my pride, my ambition, my greed destroy the family Mom worked so hard to keep together." He looked up at me then, tears welling in his eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness, Dad. I just wanted to see you, to know you're all right, and to say I'm sorry." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread. I took a deep breath. "You hurt me, Darius," I said slowly. "More than you can imagine. You and Monique made me feel like I was nothing. Like my life, my love for your mother, our memories, all of it, was just old junk." "I know," he whispered, "and I can't take it back." I leaned forward. "Do you remember what your mother used to tell you when you broke something?" He frowned. "She said everything broken can be mended if you care enough to fix it." "That's right," I said softly. "But mending takes time and sincerity." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then I'll take all the time you'll give me." For a long while, we sat in silence, listening to the wind outside. The weight of the years between us seemed to lift, piece by piece. I thought of Loretta, her wisdom, her love, her quiet foresight. I imagined her watching us now, smiling that gentle smile of hers. Finally, I said, "You can stay for dinner if you'd like. Clara makes a stew your mother would have approved of." He looked surprised, then nodded quickly. "I'd like that, Dad." That evening, we sat at the same table Loretta and I had once dreamed of filling with grandchildren and laughter. Clara joined us, serving food and pretending not to notice the tension that slowly melted into warmth. Darius ate quietly at first, then began talking about work, about his regrets, about how he'd realized that success without peace meant nothing. I listened, saying little, but something inside me began to soften. After dinner, we stepped outside. The sky was clear, full of stars. "Mom would have loved this," he said, looking up. "She does," I replied. "She's here in every wind that passes through those trees, in every flower that blooms in the garden. She never left us." He nodded, wiping his eyes. Before he left that night, he turned to me and said, "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then start by living the kind of life your mother believed you could." He nodded and drove away into the night. I watched his car disappear down the long dirt road, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or fear. I felt hope. Days passed, and then weeks. Darius began calling regularly, just to talk. Sometimes he visited on weekends, helping with chores around the farm. He wasn't the same man who'd once tried to take everything from me. He laughed more easily now, and his eyes carried humility instead of hunger. One evening, We planted new rose bushes in Loretta's garden. She'd like these, he said, patting the soil. She would, I replied. She'd like seeing us here together even more. We stood there for a while, side by side, the scent of fresh earth filling the air. I felt Loretta's presence between us, soft, forgiving, eternal. Later that night, after Darius had gone, I sat on the porch with Clara. The stars shimmered above, and the farm was silent except for the distant sound of crickets. You did it, she said. You found peace. I smiled. Loretta did it. She built this peace for me. I just had to learn how to live in it. And your son, he's learning too, I said. Maybe one day, he'll understand what truly matters. I leaned back, feeling the cool breeze against my face. The years had taken much from me. My wife, my health, my certainty. But they had given me something greater, wisdom. I finally understood what Loretta had meant when she whispered before she died. Don't tell anyone what I leave you. She wasn't just talking about money or property. She meant strength, faith, the ability to stand alone when the world turns cruel. That was her true inheritance. As the night deepened, I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, my love. You saved me, and you saved him too." The wind carried the scent of roses across the porch, and I smiled. Loretta was there, in every breath of air, in every corner of this land, in every quiet heartbeat that reminded me life still had meaning. And for the first time in years, I knew I wasn't alone.